Hi, welcome everybody. My name is Dr. David Dowding, and for those of you watching this at home, I hope you find this useful and enjoyable. Today we'll be talking with David Dowding, who is a professional in ballroom dance, and he works a lot with students in wheelchair as well as other disabilities. He'll be chatting with us about these topics as well as some of his experiences that he's had over the years. I just want to begin with a little bit of a presentation introduction to what we'll be speaking about today, and then we'll dive into the conversation as we go. So let me just share my screen. So today we'll be talking, as I said, about dance therapy and wellness for the aging population, dance as rehabilitation for post-stroke patients, dance for the visually impaired, as well as wheelchair dance, and dance for the hearing impaired. We'll get any questions if you guys have. If you didn't catch us today, just send me the email and we'll answer as fast as we can. So let's keep going. So without further ado, David Dowding studied at University of Connecticut, where he joined the UCONN dance team, first as a dancer, performing throughout the Northeast and competing in the USABDA circuit, before becoming the UCONN dance coach after graduation. David is also the co-director of the Marion E. Wade Center in Wheaton College, and he's worked with several students, as I've mentioned, in wheelchair dance. I'm actually wanting to show you a little bit of a piece that he's done with one of his students. So we're going to go to that link for a second. Just open that. David, I don't know if I missed anything, but feel free to add anything to the introduction.
No, I mean, I have continued to develop my dancing with people who are seated while looking at dance with me, and developed a training program for them. So in that way, other instructors might also be able to work with those types of clients.
Perfect. Okay, I think I'll reshare now with the actual video. Let me know if you see the video.
Yeah.
Can you hear it?
Yeah.
Perfect.
I hold your wrist. I was that bad. Dance.
Oops. Let me try that again. I'm not sure why it stopped.
I was bedbound. I hold your wrist. I was that bad. Dance really helps me. My name is Lauren Arena, and I am a Dance with Me student.
She always loved dancing from even when she was little. She would say to me, "Mommy, one day I would like to do that. I'd love to dance." And then when she became ill, that became impossible to do. She has something called meek.
It's a very rare disorder, I guess, and I'm one of 20 in the world that have it.
The pathway in the brain that controls movement, controls the signals that the brain sends. It's stuck. The door is stuck and it doesn't open all the time. So that's why she has these constant movements. And she can't control them, which is what made it difficult in the beginning to dance.
When I first started at John Nim's studio, I was holding a wrist, and they were holding my wrist.
The stimulus of grabbing her hand would set her off, would make the shaking start. So she was determined not to let that stop her. And she kept going and kept going. And then when she met David, he said to her, "You're going to dance. You're going to dance with the hand holding and everything." And he had tirelessly worked with her.
The ultimate goal is to get her to not need a wheelchair anymore. Lauren, I've never once looked at her as a person in a wheelchair. And I tell her all the time, whenever she has her little moments of, you know, she can't do it or whatever, I say, you're no different than anybody else. You're just like everybody else. You're a regular person. You want to dance? That's something that you're passionate about? Great. We're going to do it to the max.
I just progressed, got better. You know? Now I hold hands, I roll across, or do mini solos.
Today, she actually did her first competition. Actually doing some heats and, you know, different things in the smooth category. And she's just very inspiring, I think, to everyone. And the dancing has helped her with her physical condition as well. Lauren was not born, you know, with her disability. I mean, she was born with it because it's a mutation in the brain, but she didn't have symptoms until she was 10. So she remembers what life was like before this happened to her. Before she started dancing, she was very depressed, had no friends.
Alone, depressed, bullied a lot, but now I'm in a family. I can't say it enough how supportive everyone is. I was nervous that see me as someone in a wheelchair. How they even see see me. That's what I love. They often say I'm the inspiration. I really don't know. I'm just myself, just being myself.
So that's a little bit of Lauren there. David did a great job with her while teaching her in the studio. In general, he'll speak more about it, but I'm going to go on to some of the slides that I have regarding some of the other topics before we dive into that subject in particular. So now you should see my slides. Right, David?
Yep.
Perfect. So my own experience was with the aging population in various areas, locations around the world. One of them being London, where I've mentioned this previously in the dance therapy session that I worked in a community center where we had different types of populations, including post-stroke patients, visually impaired, and elderly with several age-related conditions as well. I tried to use my education as a dance scientist to present programs for them that were suitable to their movement abilities, mental capacities, as well as the general well-being of them as humans. Some of the considerations I wanted to mention with the older dancers are, of course, the lower bone density. So the bones are much more brittle, whereas a younger bone is a little bit like a bamboo shoot. So if you fall on it or if you hit it, it's going to just bend and come back, whereas the older bones are much more prone to injury because of the lower density. Another common issue is the fused vertebrae. So that's why you see a lot of hunched over older people. As they're getting older, the vertebrae will tend to fuse, and trying to make them do movements that are against that are actually damaging. You know, so as dancers, while we do consider posture to be paramount, I urge you to think about what is the ability of that person in front of you in such cases. The general lack of mobility, so depending on their lifestyle, how they have dealt with their own bodies and what movement vocabularies that they have learned throughout the years, they might or might not be able to do certain movements and perform certain actions that you would like them to do. So again, that being a big consideration, in particular with the older and aging populations. A lack of flexibility goes together with that, right? So a lot of scar tissue from previous injuries, potentially a lot of just tightness in the muscles, which perhaps are not being used as much as in the younger days. So considering that when asking them to do movements and designing the program around those parameters. Memory issues, you know, we're not going to go into the topic of Alzheimer's here because we spoke about this in the previous session, but even just memory loss that is without a full Alzheimer's is common. So in a way to treat them a little bit like the younger dancers, where we are slightly lowering the expectations on the mental and physical capacities in order to get them in the state of flow where they can still perform to the abilities and still feel like they're improving each time without overburdening them beyond the ability and strength. Coordination again goes together with that, especially when it's combined with the fear of falling, as I mentioned, with the more easier potential for breaking bones and such. A lot of them get a trauma from falling once or twice, and have coordination issues from even the vertebrae that affect their limbs as they go on and as they age without working on that. Social quirks, of course, in a way, for anybody who has worked with the aging population, you'll know that they are quite much like you could see the younger dancers, where they will not want to dance with someone, or they will not want to dance right now, or they will not want to dance this dance or that dance or to that music. So again, being sensitive to that and understanding that there are certain mental changes that come with retirement, with perhaps isolation, and just a certain expectation that perhaps all the dancers will get along with each other, or even wanna dance, right? So just remembering that as teachers, I feel is important. And I believe that kind of goes with the social discomforts. Perhaps dancing in a public space, or perhaps dancing with another male might be an issue depending on the cultural background or their own history. Another case study that I was mentioning before is the one where I had several people with other issues, including the post-stroke patient. There was a young girl actually who couldn't step. Like half of her body was it wasn't paralyzed, but it was in a very low mobility. So I had to design a program where I would allow her to step throughout her dances in a much slower manner, and just slowly each week to try to get her to actually put her foot flat on the floor, because she would keep rolling her foot in and then just shifting her whole side of the body to the right. And we worked a little bit through some basics of the dances, trying to input that rehabilitation within that, as with the permission of her doctor, of course. It was not a private session or anything, but I allocated time to try and work with her separately because of that. And this was not a very wealthy area. This was simply a very middle class to lower class area. So the classes were not expensive, and which was one of the reasons a lot of these people attended them. And I guess one of the main rewards for me just was to see that the change that it made in their lives, and allowed them to be both improving physically and getting a social interaction with people, younger, older, and just in different situations. Like there was a young man who had a glass eye, for example, who besides that was a relatively handsome young man. But you know, I imagine he came there to be able to socially interact again, you know, despite the accident that he had, and just kind of trying to ease him in. I didn't have to adjust anything physically, because physically he was fit, but having kind of to be sensitive to his insecurities perhaps was very important in this case. As was another student who was completely visually impaired. She would come with her husband, and she would dance with me mainly, and with another person who had experience. And ironically, she had better balance than many of the other dancers, which speaks to the kinesthetic abilities of our body to balance ourselves, especially in movement. So yeah, don't discount if you ever have visually impaired. You know, if their attitude is right, if they're not in too much trauma, they'll be able to perform most of the movements, because they're used to using their kinesthetic sense for balance rather than their eyes. So, I mean, being mindful and always paying attention to the surroundings and always kind of keeping in touch will help. But in general, if otherwise they're healthy in their body, they will be able to move almost like anyone else. So that's a little bit about that. Some research and resources that I found, if you want to take a look on some of these areas, I encourage you to research that, look at scientific journals, and if you're interested, as there's a lot of information there beyond the everyday experience of us as teachers, and we can always enhance that from both sides, the theorist into the theory, from practitioners and practitioners using the theory to improve their teaching methods. So I think now I'm going to allow David to continue. As I've said, I gave him a little introduction, and he'll speak about wheelchair dance as well as hearing impaired, and how he was always learning about the body and teaching throughout his experience. Okay, David, it's all you.
Yeah, I think that, you know, it's very interesting what you had mentioned previously in regards to really the body's own capability, and always finding new ways to be able to accommodate people with different both comfortability and abilities physically that they're capable of doing in order to be able to achieve, you know, in reality, the same end goal of dancing, and how that the movement required for dancing is so vast in regards to what kind of coordination needs to happen from one dance to the next. So that always really amazes me. You know, working with people who are seated, as you played in the video with Lauren, they just want to be like everybody else. And in that regard, a lot of them don't think that they can do the dancing at first. Whatever their ailment might be and whatever their reason might be for being seated, since that is, you know, one of my specialties, and, you know, a great deal of people that I work with. And being able to then, you know, I have a student right now who I'm working with, and one of the things that we keep doing is we keep taking apart movements for her. You know, like you had mentioned, small increments, right? And so with this current student that I have, I'm currently working on her just holding my hand while I'm pulling her, you know, pulling her forward, me going backward in the wheelchair. And also her me being able to push her, and her being able to, you know, grab the wheel and turn it herself. And just those two dance moves alone have become so complex because of all of the different things that we're diving into. What muscles? I mean, I send her home with exercises all the time. Hey, listen, this is, you know, and with Lauren, same, you know. And it was very interesting to me that the things that I would then be taking apart to get a dance move, I would send them home with those as exercises in mini pieces, and then they would go to their physical therapist, and then they would be like, hey, this is what we need to work on. And it was very interesting to me. And actually, you know, through talking with through two of my students that I currently work with that are seated, it's a bit sad in regards to the amount of non-work that they're doing with their physical therapist. You know, a lot of the times, I mean, I'm sure that they're doing their job as physical therapists, but it just seems to me sometimes that the end goal of physical therapy has the bar so much lower than for me when they come in as, hey, I want to dance. For me, I'm like, okay, so we're going to dance, right? No matter what that means, no matter what your capability is, no matter what you're capable of doing right now, right? Because when anybody comes into dance, any person from any walk of life, any ability, any disability, they come in, they say, oh, I want to dance, right? For me personally, as a dance instructor, I'm like, okay, great. How far can I push you in your dancing, right? Because we always want to improve, right? And we do different things to do that. We take a certain amount of lessons to do that. We focus on certain dances that we're enjoying better than others. And, I was having this conversation the other day with someone that my seated students are the ones that show the most immediate progress. Because it seems like when they come in the door, the bar has been set so low for them, both on a societal front and also on a physical front. And they might be going to physical therapy, they might be doing it twice a week or whatever, or anything like that. But they come in and, I've had them multiple times telling me that they've done more physical therapy. They've learned more about how to use their chair. They've done more physically and improved more physically in their lessons with me than they have from any physical therapist that they've ever had in their whole life. And another thing that I just said there, right, is another sad thing. Not only that, but, especially if they're born with certain conditions that, restrict them to a chair and whatnot, they just get placed in the chair. There's no manual. There's no one who teaches them how to use it. There's no one who shows them things. There's no teacher that they go. There's no additional, not like a physical therapist, right? But like some other kind of therapist, movement-based therapist or something like that, that teaches them how to use their wheelchair even. And that's, with working with people in chairs, that's probably the saddest part for me, is that reality. And it's like, why is the bar set so low? Maybe it's just me. Maybe just my personal bar is set so high for them when they come in. Maybe I have and I have a bit of a fondness for working with different people from different walks of life and being able to show them that they can do something. So maybe it's a combination of all of that, but that's definitely something that I've found.
I think it stems probably from the concept of functional movement and what is an injury. It's a big debate in the medical community always, what really constitutes an injury and a completion of rehabilitation, let's say. So just to define an injury or a disability in itself is complex for the purposes of like categorizing it, for governments, for doctors, right? So I think when they come in there, they need to set like a minimal bar, as you said, and for them, I think for the most part, functional movement is what they need to get them to, which means like getting a can of soup, let's say, from somewhere, or like sitting up, sitting down, and like just the basic movements. Was, I think we as dance teachers often strive for more, and I think that also brings about more from the patients or from the people, right? So that's an interesting thing to bring up. Actually, it comes back, I think, a little bit to the dance therapy point, that maybe dance as therapy should be a little bit more seriously taken already.
Well, and that's a big thing that I've talked about with a lot of my students and whatnot is, I know certain things are allowed through the insurance, right? If we want to go there in regards to therapy, right? I know certain people with certain conditions have done equine therapy, right? So they work with horses. And the insurance considers that, it counts it in some way. I don't really know all of that and whatnot, but I've had multiple different conversations with different clients of mine that are seated, and for them to be able to get wheelchair dancing, certified dancing, ballroom dancing as a additional therapy, very difficult, and they haven't had as much success with trying to be able to go that route, or having somebody easily recognize it, where I think that I agree with you. I 100% think that it should be, right? And it should be allowed, and not only allowed, but recommended. Like, it's just, especially when I've had so many different students of mine tell me I've done more physically, I've learned more physically, I've learned more about my chair as a mechanism through working with you than I have with anybody in my whole life.
Yeah, I mean, that's
It kind of says something about the community.
Yeah, the music, yeah, Marcia, as well, definitely, and it has been used in therapeutic purposes, definitely. And I know that dance therapy in general has been more recognized in the US, let's say, than in Canada. Now they have an association, but I don't know that there is still like a full-fledged support for it. I think one of my future projects is to get in touch with the University of New York dance therapy chair, so and discuss what are the options really for that, because I think like in many aspects, I don't know, maybe David can speak more about this in terms of the wheelchair association, the dance wheelchair, but in general, the ballroom world kind of has always been outside of the let's say government institute. Well, it's always been a privatized industry, so whatever we do it like as a business, right? But there's a lot of support, a lot of programs that would help such an initiative if we were to I think find out further. So I don't know, what was your experience with the association and your training, for example?
I mean, when I initially received my first training, it wasn't really like with a large organization, or government level organization. It was, again, a small private, business organization that gave me that. And then in my own experience and development with my pre-med background and with all of my biology background, I think it all kind of has come together, right, in its own sort of organic evolution, right, to allow me to be able to do all of this and whatnot. And then through my experience with just teaching, I've consistently had multiple different students, and they all have multiple different ailments and multiple different, backgrounds that they've come from, whether they've been in a chair, had to become in a chair, or were born in a chair, whatnot. And, obviously they're in that lifestyle, in that situation. And so my conversations with them have really been where I found this hardship of the legalities and the laws and the organizations that hold them to certain, they confine them in certain ways, right, since they are in a chair.
Mm-hmm. And you've been teaching some of the teachers, the wheelchair dance practice. Can you tell me about the experience with that? How was it? How did they take it? What was your experience and so on?
Yeah, it's always very interesting for me, right? Like I've now done, so we have a bunch of different studios that dance with me, and I've done a tour both. I've done 2 tours in the Northeast and 1 tour in Texas to bring the wheelchair program that I've developed during my time here thus far, to be able to make sure that we're able to train properly other instructors in other studios to then offer, you know, seated partner dancing as an additional program, right, in our studios, and not just as a only I do it, right, sort of thing from the New Jersey studio, right. And the other instructors, they are very, they're always very open to it and always very excited about it, right? I found that they're always very into it. And, you know, most of them actually, once I give them the fundamentals, then they're starting to play around with it. And they're starting to see, oh, what can I do? How can I move? How can I do? Right? And so that's always very interesting for me to be able to see. That happens always within the training program after we get past a certain point. But the initial point is always apprehension. It's very interesting because the initial point is always apprehension for anybody. I've had world-renowned professional coaches come in, and they used to coach me and Lauren, the girl that you showed. And then they would be asking me and talking to me and talking to my students about what's possible, what can we do choreographically when I brought them in to be able to, you know, kind of co-build something. And I remember multiple times I put them in the chair. And that was a very interesting experience. Very interesting experience because, you know, they're not used to that. Right. And so it wasn't a training program for them but just to have that one instance of putting them in the chair and whatnot, it still had the same effect that I just talked about in my training program. The first initial experience, energy, idea, emotions from them is always apprehension. Not really sure what I'm doing here. I'm not really sure how I should be moving. I'm not really sure what to do, right? I'm a professional dancer. I'm supposed to dance, but now I'm seated. Now I'm confined. Someone took away my legs. Right? And then once given the tools and the outline, really, and the structure of what the base is, then it's playtime, you know? And for professional dancers, right, the people who I'm training, right, our instructors and whatnot in our studios, professional world-renowned coaches that I have come in and whatnot, that timeline is very quick, right? Because I show them things that they're familiar with, and I'm just like, this is how you're going to do it in that position. So that timeline is very quick. When I show it to a student, it's the same timeline. It just takes a little bit longer, and depending on what their ailment is, and depending on what caused them to be in that situation, right? Like I said, whether they're born with it, whether they got there from some way, then the timeline is always very different. Where they are on the spectrum of different, you know, ailments. You know, how much it's how much control they have, right? Different people will come in and have different types of body control. And that's the first assessment, really.
Marcia is asking if you know of any seated people who became teachers.
I don't know of any seated people that have become teachers, but I know that through a couple of my students, one of them in particular, they are interested in doing dancing on the Paralympic course, right, internationally. And so I've been talking to the Paralympic Committee in Germany and kind of going back and forth with them in regards to training that they send out every once in a while. They obviously haven't done a lot because of COVID recently. But with them on the para dance sport sort of world, they do have 3 different levels of competition, right? So they have solo, where an individual would go out there in the chair by themselves. They have combi, which would be a standing and a seated. And then they have duo, which would be a seated and a seated.
Mm.
So I don't know of anybody who has been a seated dancer and then moved to a teacher. But I do know that there are platforms for seated and standing and seated to be, performing, right?
Yeah, I know. When I was researching that for some of my work, I found in Australia, there's a whole book on wheelchair training and how to prepare. So it's quite structured in that manner.
Mm.
I know you follow the roll chair.
Roll call.
Roll call, yes.
Yes, that was my initial training.
But it was the ones that I saw from Australia was, I think, like quite a thick manner, with all the possible, like the same way we have a syllabus, let's say for the like Latin ballroom, they have a whole syllabus for wheelchair.
Mm.
Have you come across such initiatives besides that?
I haven't come across any like that besides the one that I created myself.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So like I have a syllabus. I have created both a training manual as well as a syllabus that's based off of, the American syllabus that we use here in the studios. But
And
that's it. I adapted mine, to suit that. And really, like I said, with the training, it's I would be interested to see what they have, because for me it's more about being able to communicate with the individual and knowing what the ground rules are and the base rules are, and then beyond that it's all experimental and creative, right? Because everybody comes in with different capabilities. So I have one student in particular currently who I've worked with for 4 years, I think I've had Joe. And for me and him, I'm always trying to just invent new stuff, right? He's very capable. He has a very well maneuvered upper body strength, right? Full range of motion. And so I'm always just trying to create things with him. I have another lady, and the creation with her is quite different because she's nonverbal and she can't hold my hands. Which is completely different, right? So it all depends. It's on a very long range in regards to the creation of things, which is why I believe that you can only really have a baseline from which to grow, and not a fully inclusive syllabus, right?
Yeah. Just as you're speaking, like it made me think now that the Healthy Dancer Canada is having a conference. I'm sure they'd love to hear some of your that information, or probably to build a resource towards that in in an actual sense, right? Whatever that, I don't know if you put in writing what you have, but some of that we can probably publish through them as well. I mean,
that would be great. I would be more than happy to share my thoughts and information with them. do have it all in writing, the training manual and the syllabus itself.
Mhm.
And if that's something that they'd be interested in, then I'd be more than happy to share.
That's great. I think you were gonna also mention one that you did with the deaf or the
I have a couple of students who have hearing loss as another special condition, I guess we would say, right? And I always find it very interesting, always. With the one in particular that I work with, she lost her hearing, you know, when she was in her 20s, I believe, right? And so she remembers what it, you know, very similarly to Lauren, right? The girl that you showed the video of. She remembers what it was like to walk, right? And she got symptoms and she ended up in the chair, right? This other student that I have, she knew what it was like to hear. She was, in fact, she was like all into music, singing major, like singing all the time, really big into music. And so she remembers what that was like, you know. And then she lost her hearing, unfortunately. And so for me, working with her is always very interesting. And I'm always trying to find new ways to be able to give her the metronome of the music, really, right? Because that's really what she needs. She needs, what is the beat? Okay, here it is. And so generally I physically give it to her. Right? Either that, or if I have the choice, right? If we're not at a competition, if we're in practice and I'm choosing the music, I choose all music that she will remember. Right? Because it's like, you know, if you try and think of a song, that's a very familiar song for you that you like know, then you can sing it in your head without any external stimuli.
Right.
Very similar. And especially if we're at an event, because she does events, she does competitions and things like that. If we're at an event and they play a song that I know that she knows because it's from that period of time, then I tell her, you know the song. And as soon as I give her the song, she's like, she starts to like, you know, loud a little bit and everything. And I'm like, yes, you're on. She's fine. It's like she can hear the music again.
That's so interesting. Yeah.
Very interesting, right? And her sensitivity in regards to the soles of her feet, how she can feel the beat, and also the palms of her hands, how she can feel it in the walls. Very interesting to me. Super sensitive. Right? I'm trying to like put my hand on the wall and feel what she's feeling. Every once in a while I can feel, but not as well as she can, of course. You know? So with her, a lot of the times I'm giving her the beat physically, or I'm telling her what the pattern is. And she works so hard. She works so hard at being able to recognize certain things. So I'm always trying to, I feel like with her almost, I'm trying to catch up to her because she's got so many different, not habits, I don't want to say that, but she's got so many different like mechanisms that she's developed personally over the years since her hearing loss, to be able to say, okay, I can figure this out, right? And so for me, I'm always trying to catch up and be like, okay, what else can I do to help? How can I give it to you that it'll make it easier? What other kind of trick can I think of that you haven't thought of already? Right? You know, so especially because she was so into music and then lost her hearing. And so she jumped on the horse quite soon later. You know what I mean? Like she still sings and she still tries to figure songs out and she still tries to, keep up that musicality that she had before, obviously not in the same capacity, but she works so hard at being able to do all of that already that there's not much bonus that I can give her. Whereas my seated partners that I work with, that I told you about, I also don't treat them any different and give them all their tricks and things like that, but they haven't thought that they could do this physically, so their bar is much lower. Right? So I'm always doing that. And then there's also the additional work with them that is showing them how to move within this contraption. Right? Which is always very interesting for me. And it's basically a lot of like physics, right? Of how to work the chair as a contraption itself.
Well, it's like a prop. I mean, I remember I did the training with you, and it was quite an interesting feat, right? It's like another partner, as people said, right? And
yeah, totally. Yeah, that would be interesting to hear how you felt about the training, because for me, like, I created the training, I've been giving the training, I've been doing the training so much. For me, I'm on one side, and it's very difficult for me to try to be able to put myself in the shoes of someone experiencing it for the first time.
I mean, I really liked it. I think that for me, it was, I knew always I wanted to try it, like before I even met you. So it was a good opportunity to see how it is, right? And I think your design was very well done in terms of the classes. I feel the timeline was good, except, I mean, obviously we would be great to have that as a regular thing or as a continuous development. But for as far as like first few introductions go, I think it was perfect, like in terms of how we progress from one step to another, from like sitting and switching partners. I think that gave a lot of perspective to everybody. And yeah, I think it has a lot of potential. I think that's why I think maybe we can take it further eventually. But yeah, I think it was great. You said you had some resources in writing that would be also something I think where we can use eventually. But
yeah, absolutely.
The live version was great.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. Yeah, it was interesting. I always try and make sure that everybody is able to put themselves in other people's shoes as much as possible.
Yeah, and I think you succeeded in that. I think now let's see if we have any questions. So Marcia, do you have anything you wanted to ask or mention? Feel free to unmute and speak.
Hi, good afternoon. It was very interesting hearing you both. Yeah, as a dance teacher, I've been, when you're learning to teach, sometimes you take jobs and you haven't had any training in dealing with that. And I was curious what either of you thought about the teaching in a mixed setting. David mentioned that a little bit with the senior center, but when I first got hired many summers ago to teach in a group home. So there were people with wheelchairs, people with Down syndrome, there were people with birth defect, mental impairment. And sometimes this is my personal opinion, but the staff kind of look at it like that's their relief time. So we're just babysitters to play the music and make them dance. But I was more deeply curious how to manage a group setting with people at so many different levels for communication or for understanding and making it joyful. I mean, that was my main objective, was okay, let's make this fun. But I would like to learn more about what you mentioned, David Dowding, about the pushing, being able to push them beyond their comfort zone. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I think that for me, in a group setting, the main thing that I always try to do in any group setting is try and make sure that I have a baseline for what my expectation is, right? So if I'm in a group setting and I have a baseline, I need to be able to figure out from the people that I have in front of me, what is the average capability, right? Not what is the lowest capability, but what is the average capability? Because you mentioned that you said that you wanted to still be able to make sure that it was fun, right? Which is what dancing should be in its, most rudimentary form, right? It should just be fun. And so for me, I try and find that average, right? Okay, where's the middle of the spectrum, right? So once I find that middle of the spectrum, then I can be able to adapt both ways. And so that way I can make sure that I'm giving variation on what I'm giving, right? So maybe I'm giving, the advanced people a little bit more, hey, you need to be doing this, or I know you know how to do this, you should add this in, or whatever, right? Or giving variation to be able to accommodate people who aren't really capable. And I also think in a group setting, you're always going to have a couple of people who are going to have fun no matter what you're doing, no matter what level you're doing that at, as long as the energy is good in the room, and as long as they're moving around, then they're having a good time. So you're always going to have those people. And I think that that's your best bet moving in there. Now, if you have both seated and standing people, that obviously makes things a bit different, right? And in that regard, like, you just have to be adaptable, right? So maybe you find if you go in and there's only 2 people that are seated, but the rest that are standing, and you find your average for the standing, and then you make the adjustment for the seated, right? If it's 50-50, now we're talking about a different split, right? Or if there's more seated than there is standing, then it's again a different split, right? So we have to be able to make sure of that. And the other thing that I find that always increases the fun factor, I guess you could say, right? The involvement factor, right, is if you're getting everybody involved, right? You said that it was in a group home, Marcia?
Yes, there was a day program kind of thing. Yeah.
So like in a group home, right, setting and whatnot, I would do the same as in a regular group class setting, where I pair people up, right? And I'm pairing them off. And in that regard, I would pair them in matched capabilities. I would make sure that nobody's uncomfortable in regards to who they're having to potentially dance with. You know what I mean? Right? Because I think that especially in a mixed scenario, I had some standing people, some standing students of mine who were always very curious about being able to dance with my seated partners, with my seated students. And I even had one standing student of mine, and we went as far as her and a seated and another seated, Lauren in particular, the one who showed David, and myself, the 4 of us, we did a showcase number, right? And because she was just so interested in it. She was like, I think that's great. I think that, it's fantastic that they're able to come in, that you're able to teach them. And I want to know how to be able to move, because Joe would come to the parties all the time. And he would get out there, he would move, right? But they were like, and some of my standing partners, they would like try and replicate what they saw me doing, right? So I think involvement and comfortability are probably 2 of your best tools to be able to help with that scenario.
Thank you. Yeah, because even at different levels, like when in my ballet class, I've some students that are like borderline, what do they call it? I don't know, with the labels, the autistic.
Mhm.
And sometimes it seems like they want to express themselves, and much like my experience with people with Down syndrome, that they just react and are so joyful when you put on their favorite song or whatever. They'll dance forever.
Yeah.
But to get them to focus and to learn something new is a challenge. So
Correct.
I found that I started doing the same thing. Like I would say, well, what do you know? Make them demonstrate, and that was kind of working. That
There you
they
go.
would get that, but sometimes we don't have that they're all the same, since they're in a mixed group. So you want to make them feel included and not pressure them too much, because they do pick up a lot. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing what people are capable of doing, especially when they're given the opportunity and when they're encouraged to put themselves out there like that.
Yeah.
So
Go
I
ahead.
don't know if you have anything else, David.
No, I think this is a great note. I think to end the webinar. I think that was a nice conversation, and a lot of information has been given also through our own little sections as we spoke. So I encourage you all to come and contact us if you have any questions. If you want to support us, once again, the link in the registration link has a PayPal page that if you want to see more lectures like this, and I'll send everyone David's information as well for any of the projects that he might have in the future. David, do you have anything else to add?
No, I was just checking the live stream on the Facebook to see if we had any questions or anything like that.
All right. Oh, is there any?
No,
Oh, they're just saying hi.
they're just saying hi. Actually, Sasha McDonald is one of my seated students who's joining us from Canada.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. Hi, Sasha. If she wants the recording, I'll put my email in the, so please email for recording to David at, well, I'll just, yeah. Please contact me for recording. For the recording. All right. Perfect. So thank you so much, David, for coming on.
Of course, thanks for
Yeah.
having me.
Yeah, thanks, Marcia, for joining us, and thanks for everybody who will be watching at home. Join us next week for one last webinar on screen dance and dance for the camera as well. Thank you, guys. Bye, David. I'll email you.
Yeah, let me know.